college football has been a mess for a little bit, but I don't know if anything outside of maybe the Nico transfer when he left the Tennessee program for UCLA, I don't know if anything personifies what a mess this sport can be sometimes than Lane Kiffin leaving an Ole Miss team and program right now in the midst of a playoff run to go start over with an LSU team that isn't even ranked right now. And we could talk about what LSU is at its power versus Ole Miss. Like, it's just crazy to think he would do that. And amidst all this chaos, as I'm watching this cycle play out where, we're all just waiting to see what Lane's going to do, I'm just so thankful for the 22 years that Kyle Whittingham has given to Utah football. The fact that he stayed and helped lead this program, even stayed when he could have left for an SEC team. We'll talk about that a little more in a moment. But Alex, in an era where we see so many coaches hop, and let's be honest, none of them are able to really leave their school on good terms. Like, just makes me so grateful that we had a coach who really wanted to be a Utah man through and through, and he was that. And the Utah era that it seemed could be coming to a close with Whitt potentially stepping away. Like, let's not forget, I know Utah, like we said, they didn't hit their goal. Kyle Whittingham has 8-10 win seasons. That is incredibly hard to do in college football. The longevity is unheard of in this sport, and I'm just so grateful that Kyle Whittingham has helped transform this Utah football program.
Yeah, that's a loyalty you can't buy these days, I mean, and Lane Kiffin's a perfect example of just what the world of college football seems to be becoming. Obviously, it's not the first time Kiffin has left a job in bad terms, right, to move on somewhere else. He's done it again, but this time I feel like it's a little bit different because for as long as I can remember, JT, Ole Miss was irrelevant. Ole Miss wasn't, there weren't anything in the SEC, and Lane Kiffin took that job in 2020 in that COVID year. Took him 5-5 that first season, but then has slowly built up the program. And now they're SEC contenders, right? It's a school that's never made the championship game, but they're still in the mix of being one of the better teams in the SEC. And that's a lot of credit to Lane Kiffin, the recruiting that he's done and building the program up the way that he has. And somebody comes in with a quote unquote better job, better paying money and buys the loyalty, right? And now his loyalty and his allegiances changed to LSU. It seems that's happened it's happening time and time again. It's happening over and over again. And I feel like if you're a Utah fan, you have to be grateful for what Kyle Whittingham has done with this program and his loyalty to stay with this program and continue to build what he's been building for the last 21 years, man.
It's been incredible. And it's funny, like we just mentioned Lane Kiffin left an SEC job for an SEC job. Well, Kyle Whittingham actually almost left Utah for an SEC job way back then, because you just mentioned Lane Kiffin's had some ugly exits. In 2010, Lane Kiffin left Tennessee to go to USC. And what did that leave? A vacancy, of course, with the Volunteers. Who was one of the people they reached out to? Kyle Whittingham, all the way back in 2010. We've talked about it before on this show. In fact, Kalani Sitake, if we'll tie back the first segment in with this one, who was Utah's DC at the time, they together were trying to figure out like what they were going to do. And it even said here in the Deseret News article, which has a good breakdown of the story in the Golf Luncheon by Jay Drew as well. You guys can read it at thedeseretnews.com. It was about just details of the conversation. Like Whitt and Sitake were genuinely very close to taking the Tennessee job. But according to the article, it does talk about where Kyle just said, he called Kalani one morning and said, hey, you know what? Like, let's just stay and make it awesome here in Utah. And Sitake said, yeah, it just felt right to stay. And I'm so grateful that he decided to stay, because it's easy to go chase that bigger job, the bigger opportunity. Like, let's just call a spade a spade. Like, Tennessee is a bigger job than the Utah job. But what Kyle Whittingham built here is a legacy that will last. And he could have easily gone somewhere else and maybe tried to give himself a better chance to win a national title, but he stayed, and he is going to be a legend forever because of that. Something Lane Kiffin just, maybe he will miss and falls off a cliff, and it's like, oh man, we're just chasing the ghost of Kiffin. But I don't know, man. Those SEC fans don't forgive easily.
They do not. And to tie it back to Kyle Whittingham and talking about that, the potential of Tennessee job, man, you go back and, imagine they do take that job, right? Does Utah ever go back to back in the Pac-12? Does Utah ever make those Rose Bowls? Does Utah, find success and become one of the perennial teams in the Pac-12 and receive some of the national respect that they've earned right under Kyle Whittingham? There's so many variables there. And obviously, does Kyle Whittingham find the same success and build up Tennessee the way that he's built up Utah over the course of the last couple of years, right? There's so many variables there, but ultimately, I think things happened the way that they were supposed to happen, and Kyle Whittingham stayed, built up Utah. Now Utah's built up a little bit of a national reputation, right? They have a little bit of a national respect. And I feel like you saw that a little bit with this year's college football playoff rankings, right? Utah being ranked as high as they were early on. And that doesn't come with Kyle Whittingham. So again, I think Utah fans need to appreciate that loyalty. Whether he stays, whether he goes, it'll be he's a legend. He's a living legend for the state of Utah.
And some people might be listening to this and be like, well, the Tennessee job's not like the Alabama job in the SEC. Well, there was actually one point. There's a little movie called The Blind Side, which I think a lot of people have probably heard of. There's a scene in that movie where like all the college coaches come to visit the top ranked prospect in that movie. The top ranked, I forget the guy's name off the top of my head. I think it was or something like that. Yeah. And literally they all go, oh, when the Tennessee coach shows up, like that's how good that Tennessee job can be when it's firing at all cylinders. And Kyle Whittingham said, no, I'm going to stay at Utah, which I absolutely love too. And really is just crazy, this whole saga too, Alex, because you see how toxic these things can get because Kiffin leaves and now he's taken coaches off his staff as well too. And we'll see all the recruits and everything that can flip too. So I think the thing that'll be interesting to see that could also affect Utah is, does this lead to the college football calendar being changed to where something like this couldn't happen? Let's say a Morgan Scalley takes over Utah, crushes it. He gets, just for, just spitballing here, he gets like the Ohio State job. I mean, it's not going to happen, but you know what I mean? Like some job where it's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to take that. I wonder if they will ever change the calendar to a point where it would say, you know what? We hate what this just did to Ole Miss. I honestly don't see how they're going to win a playoff game. I think Kiffin was that valuable to them. I think his play calling and everything, I actually would have let him stay if I was Ole Miss, just for the simple standpoint of he gives you the best chance to win. I understand why they feel like they couldn't do that because he's not choosing us, but that just their team is not as good right now. They've never been this good. They just hurt their chances to win a title. I wonder if this whole disaster and what it will do to the kids, the Ole Miss players who are completely getting penalized for all of this, which is so unjust and unfair. I wonder if that will lead to a calendar change. So if this were to happen at a Utah, we would be able to keep our guys, our coaches, our players in place for a playoff run because obviously Ole Miss is struggling to do that right now, Alex. So I'm just curious to see if this will lead to larger changes.
Yeah, and I think because it is an SEC school, there's potential there for that to happen, right? Because let's say Ole Miss goes into the playoff, whether they're hosting or going somewhere for the first round of games, they go and they get the doors blown off of them, right? First game. I almost promise you, Greg, saying he's going to step in and say we need to change this because we can't have one of our schools getting embarrassed on a national stage like that. It very well possibly could happen, and I think it should, because in a situation like, let's say, for example, UNT, right, makes a playoff. Right, they're in the championship game. That there's potential for them there to potentially make it to the college football playoff. I don't think they will, especially now with their head coach leaving. But let's say, right, for the sake of this argument, UNT does make a college football playoff. He obviously just took the job at Oklahoma State. The same thing can be said, right?
Yeah.
Can they perform the same without their head coach in the college football playoff? I don't think they will. No. I don't think they can. And so even just changing the calendar, even for like the smaller schools, I think in a situation like a G5 coach leaving, I think it would be massively valuable to that G5 school and just to college football in general to have some sort of, I guess, order is the order. We I think fans across the country right now are need and want order, some type of order, and that could be a good start to it.
What's also just crazy is I look at what Tulane's coaches get. John Summerall is going to Florida. Florida's letting him coach the championship game this week and finish out his team with the playoff run. What a concept. You have like the same conference, but they're handling it differently. And that's where it was said, like, yes, Lane, he's leaving and he could have stayed to this place he's left. He deserves some blame too. But if I was Ole Miss, I would have let him stay. Because like I said, just to finish it through, I think the team is weaker. Like, what would you do, Alex, if you were them? Because I understand why they said no. Even Lane's like, I get it. But I just think they're a worse team now. And they're not some team that's ever done this before. First ever playoff appearance. And they're not as good today. So even if it means he's leaving at the end of the year, I feel like they should have kept him. What do you think?
I think there's obviously some people that are upset and some bitterness there from people who make those decisions. Like Keith, whatever his last name is. The AD, Keith Clark. There you go. Right. There's some bitterness. There's some saltiness there from him for Lane deciding to leave. And so I understand why that decision was made. But I think ultimately, like, you have a chance at something special here, something that's never been done at Ole Miss before. And you don't want to do anything to ruin that, anything to tarnish that. And so I think he probably should have let him stay, but I also see why he didn't and why that decision was made. And We'll see what Ole Miss is able to do, and we'll see how the committee decides to do with Ole Miss.
Yeah, that's a huge part of this too, to your point. Like, do they get dropped in the rankings? I don't know. I'm really curious to see how it shakes out. And I understand, like, some of you might be listening to this and going, this is Locked On Utes. How does this affect us? What I just said, this to me has the power to change this rule so that if Utah had an 11-1 season, like an undefeated season with Morgan Scalley, and all of a sudden Tennessee, whoever calls, and they're like, we need you right now. Like, I want to make sure Morgan, I don't think Morgan would leave. I'm not saying anything about him, but I want to make sure he could stay and finish this run. There's some things in place, it sounds like, that'll make it very hard. Like, not for Morgan. I'm just talking about basically telling a university you have to wait till the end of the year to make a head coaching hire. That's tough to do and enforce that, but I'm hoping that's what we get at some point. So we'll see how it all shakes out. This episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by our great friends at Gametime. The World Cup is coming back to North America for the first time since 1994. And with 48 teams for the first time ever, it's going to be massive. But let's be honest, getting tickets is usually the hardest part. That's why the Gametime app is clutch, finally giving fans the real advantage when it comes to snagging seats. With Gametime, you can track prices that drop at real time, get alerts when great seats open, and buy tickets the moment they hit the app. It puts the power back in your hands and makes going to the World Cup incredibly realistic instead of impossible. I mean, you get prices including fees up front, which I love. I mean, no last second surprises at checkout. Like, hey, where's this convenience fee coming from? Gametime lets you know where all of that stuff is at. Also, the seat view feature is a game changer. You literally see what the pitch looks like from your exact seat before you buy. You could take the guesswork out of buying World Cup tickets and every match, concert, or event with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. All caps, no spaces for $20 off your first purchase. Terms do apply. Again, download the app, make an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. All caps, no spaces for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download Gametime today. That's going to do it for today's Locked On Utes. We'll be back with you tomorrow talking the latest in Utah athletics.